Okay, we will kick off this webinar. So hello, my name is Nathan Creswell, and this webinar is Planning for Disruption, Getting Ahead of the Curve with Technology and Financial Planning. So as I said, my name is Nathan Creswell. Thank you for joining us this afternoon to participate in this panel discussion. I am the head of product for Vector. With me today is Tim Tran, who is the VP of Systems and Technology for JLE Industries and also a valued Vector customer. And we also have JT Engstrom, Chief Strategy Officer for FreightWaves. So we've carved about 30 or 40 minutes of discussion. There's not too many slides, so it's just really going to be more back and forth discussion. We've saved plenty of time for questions at the end. I'll be ably assisted by Marianne from FreightWaves in answering any questions you have. We'll also have poll questions that we'll be presenting to the audience. But if you have any individual questions, please use the chat box in the application, and we'll endeavor to get those answered. Okay. We have people in the background fielding the questions, and we'll get to them at the end. All right. So with that said, let's get started. So Tim, thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about JLE, your role, and why you're excited about today's webinar?
All right. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks, JT, for having me. You know, as Nathan kind of mentioned, I oversee all the technology and advancement of JLE industry. We are a flatbed asset company, around 350 trucks as of right now. Again, from the technology side, developing the idea, development of the product, implementation of the process, and execution of the technologies within departments. The thing I'm most excited about here is, you know, sharing our experience through this COVID. I think, you know, everybody's taken affected by this, and how we've adapted actually for the better, and using this to leverage and move our company forward by using technology. But hopefully, you know, something that I talk about or things, you know, we talk about today, you know, I just hoping that it helps someone in the audience that may be having that struggle right now, technology-wise, in the logistics industry.
Yeah, and I think JLE particularly impresses me with how you guys think about technology and how you're ahead of the curve on a lot of the topics related to technology. So I think hopefully our audience will really value hearing what you have to say there. So JT, on your side, thank you for joining as well. I think everyone here knows about FreightWaves, and you have a wealth of experience in management consulting and in investment banking. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the financial and the technology sides. So could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think this is a really exciting topic, and it's great to join you both for the discussion. As you alluded to, I started off, I was previously on the management consulting team at Oliver Wyman in their transportation group, and had a portfolio of clients right at the end of the Great Recession, which sort of kicked off my exposure to dealing with heavy industrial cyclicals in the transportation and logistics space, including but not limited to trucking companies. And so it's a subject I've lived and experienced and know well through that. And then also spent 5 years as a public equity analyst covering trucking, logistics, rail, and brokerage, as well as a few other things that overlap not as materially. And then was in investment banking for about 2 years and did deals primarily in trucking and logistics. And so I've looked at this space from a handful of different angles, and I have a deep passion for it. And you know, coming through where we are right now, you know, as we talk about both finance and technology, both subjects are super pertinent, especially as we approach or are in challenging times. And, you know, certainly on the carrier and broker side, managing cash flows and net income, and also protecting the balance sheet is critically important in terms of financial topics. And there's a handful of different mechanisms that operating companies have to be able to pull levers on various elements of the cash flow statement and the balance sheet. Then as far as technology goes, which I know we're going to talk about in a lot more detail, but a cursory overview, there historically has been an interesting balance between adoption of technology to gain competitive edge or incremental financial leverage, operating leverage, not financial leverage, while also appropriately balancing that with the risks associated with investing in technology as an early adopter without having complete visibility to the direct financial outcome prior to fully integrating whatever systems it is we're talking about. So I think as all different kinds of transportation companies, certainly truckers and brokers and logisticians, think about managing finance and technology in a challenging time. It's a market that creates the opportunity for a lot of lessons, and it also helps show some of the diamonds from the rough. And I think it was a great selection to have Tim join us. I know they do over at JLE some really impressive things, and I think even if you just looked at the growth historically, and it's been a relatively short history, but a very impressive one. I think it speaks to their capabilities, which is really tremendous.
Yeah, I think you brought up a lot of important points there, JT, and I think that you hit the nail on the head with a lot about investing in technology and then being aware of the impacts to both the financial side, and maybe in advance of where the full ROI is known, right? Maybe if we can start with just talking about the goals and the initiatives, going into 2020. And I know, JT, you speak with a lot of fleets. And of course, besides increasing revenues, which I'm sure all of our audience members are keen on doing, what do you feel were the top initiatives that you were seeing going into 2020 for most fleets that you were talking to?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think to most effectively answer that question, we could talk about the setup heading into 2020 and what the mentality was, Jan 1st, if you will. And to paint a little bit of a brief picture, 2019 was set up by 2018, which was it was a very tight capacity market on the back of weather-related force majeure or black swan style events in the form of hurricanes, which had driven the contract market higher. It resulted in a lot of fleet expansions and reinvestments in assets, which then subsequently created the market for secondary market asset sales to owner-operators and replenish their fleets, which then directly parlayed into the market that became 2019, which was a renormalization of volumes and demand on top of a supply side of the market that had fresh assets, from top to bottom, and it resulted in a supply and demand dynamic. I'm sorry, 2017, other hurricanes. A supply and demand dynamic in 2019 that had turned the market largely out of favor for carriers, and it resulted in contract rates that were pressured and bid seasons that more or less favored shippers, and created year-over-year negative headwinds for volumes. And so fleets and brokers alike in this environment, once the supply and demand dynamic of the market renormalized to favor shippers, broadly speaking, of course you have to break this down categorically by the functional area, resulted in both of those subsectors of operating companies, brokers, logisticians, truckers, depending on how you want to bucket them, coming into 2020 thinking through a handful of critically important factors. One is, how do we manage long-term relationships with our contracted shippers to ensure that we retain both volume and attractive rates such that we can gain or preserve sufficient return on invested capital to continue to reinvest in growth? Two, how do we take care of our drivers, at least for asset-based companies? How do we take care of our drivers, knowing that drivers are the critically important element of maintaining rolling stock asset base and operating leverage to be able to service these customer contracts. And a lot of fleets compensate drivers not just on fixed compensation, but also some form of variable compensation based off of either service metrics or miles per day or loads delivered, something of the sort. And so being able to feed them with attractive freight is important to keeping them happy. And so the driver equation is really, really important. They're also thinking about hedging risks, right? And so over the past 5+ years, pure fleets had started developing asset-light operations, largely in the form of brokerage, to be able to counterbalance the cycle, so that when the market was tight, the asset base could materially outperform from a cash flow generation point of view. But then when trough approached, the spot capacity of a brokerage operation, if fed with volumes, could also drive counter-cyclical cash flows to continue to sustain the maintenance capex of the asset base. And so this two-pronged approach has become much more common, and heading into 2020 is certainly prevalent. And fleets are thinking through, consolidated operating companies are thinking through, how do we leverage this portfolio of offerings to continue to grow, right? And of course, no one, Jan 1st, 2020 was conscious of the market that we would be sitting in right now, given the black swan nature of the event. And so those are some of the big elements that people were thinking through.
Yeah, definitely echoes those thoughts when I speak with customers at Vector, and the taking care of the shipper relationships, the long-term shipper relationships, the drivers. Vector's applications definitely keep the driver in mind and making sure that they have a good experience. I think even JLE, on the JLE side, Tim, you guys have a brokerage operation, asset-light brokerage operation. So switching tacks a little bit, Tim, on your side, hearing what JT is saying, on the JLE side, what were your top 3 goals of the year, from a systems and technology perspective, the top 3 initiatives to help the company reach those goals, right?
Yep. So kind of just like JT said, the most, the 2 prongs is our customers and our drivers, making sure they're, taken care of. And how do we do that? We give more time to our people, from our driver managers or load planners, to have more times with the customers or with the drivers by leveraging technology. Our first goal is, we saw, people always think of technology. They always think of, hey, operations and sales, There's so much more you can do with, like, kind of JT talked about the financial side, the accounting side, that you can automate a ton of processes that help, improve efficiency, and again, more towards customer and driver service, essentially. So our first goal is basically developing more RPAs, robotic process automation, just throughout all the departments, not just operations, not just sales, to help leverage all of this to, again, attack and make sure our drivers are taking care of our customers. For example, Nathan, with Vector's help, we created an OCR that it digests, rate cons, different types of forms. Not all customers have EDI capability. It's very expensive to integrate, to house, and to have those technologies on site. So what I see that some of our bigger customers that aren't able to do that. So we leverage technology where, with Vector, we ingest that data, spit it out into our system. So it is like EDI, but again, our customer doesn't have to, deal with that brunt of, okay, I got to integrate, I got to maintain, I got to service this stuff. and make sure it's running, and then get with other vendors as well. Again, the purpose of that is accuracy of data, making sure the data is coming in. Again, people building loads within the system manually. It's, there's, after building 100 loads or something like that, you're bound to make a typo. So again, this minimizes error, but makes it more efficient for our users as well. So that's just one type within our operation. Again, safety, we're building RPAs, finance and accounting RPAs through invoicing checks. Just
for our audience, when you say RPA, what does that stand for?
Robotic process automation. So basically, not the minute tasks that everybody, like, again, I see people invoice 300 loads a day, and it's just 80% of the time, it's the same task over and over and over again. Why not eliminate that 80%? Now they have 80%, to do something else or be more productive for more important tasks. And so that's our first one. And then our second one, like JT said, it's our drivers. Drivers have to deal with a lot right now. COVID-19, they have to deal with their hours. They have to deal with where am I going to stop to eat? This truck stop's not open anymore. What lanes are closed, states restriction, government restriction. I mean, the list goes on of how much they have to deal with when they're out on the road. And, what we started doing, with our internal system is we started to gather all this data into one house and in one place. From a safety perspective, for hours of service perspective, whether they like to eat, whether they like to sleep, when they start their day. So we can better understand our drivers to be able to supply them of their needs. And, once we can do that, like JT said, our drivers happy. Guess what? Our customer services are better. Our numbers are better because we understand and like kind of a predictive model how that driver is going to do on that lane. Is that a good fit for him? Is it not a good fit for him? Should he maybe go somewhere else for shorter miles? Just really depends. Just like people never think about it. Of course, all sales, they all have the type of CRM system and stuff like that. Why not have that same kind of system for drivers to really understand, their need with data before they even know what they like. How nice would it be as somebody new coming in transportation? I can tell you exactly these 20 drivers, what they like, what lanes they like, how much they run a day, and just they already know the driver pretty well by just sitting down and understanding that data. And the last thing is our internal system where all this is housed. We're pushing another version out, by the end of the year to gather and fine tune all these different processes to really hone into one spot.
That's really interesting. It sounds like a CRM for your drivers, essentially, is what you're describing, right?
Correct. Just understanding the driver, because the small things that people, may not think about, may be important to them, but we don't know that because most of the time, like people are like, hey, on-time performance, your rate per mile, how much revenue are you getting on the trucks, things like that. But, we kind of take the standpoint of looking into that driver more on an individual base instead of as a whole.
Interesting. And so you're using a lot of technology there. Tim, like how have you been able to adopt all this technology so quickly? So, I speak to a lot of customers across the Vector customer base, and not all of them are as tech savvy as JLE. But, how have you been able to release, develop, and deploy all this technology so easly?
Well, the first thing is the company as a whole has to have the buy-in, not just upper management, not just even the VPs or directors. It's everyone from the accounting ladies that are invoicing loads, from our safety department that are talking to our drivers. It's just buy-in for everyone. Majority of the success, before I came on board, was laid out, due to our CEO, Evan Pulaski. He understands the importance of technology and molding it to the culture and the strategy of JLE Industries. Like I said, technology is here for everyone at JLE. We show all the departments, where we can help with the process, but we do it firsthand. So again, going back to that invoicing, watching this lady invoice, 300 loads a day, automating that process, see firsthand, oh my God, this technology can help me. And I think that's the thing sometimes with other companies, they'll, either get technology or get something, but don't really understand the process, if they need it, if it weighs, if it's really needed or not. Basically, a case study. And that's a tough part because again, I sit there, I listen, I watch, I learn, I do. And that's how you really understand the process. Be like, okay, now this tech will work here because I did it. I understand it. And then just fine tuning it. And then again, then just let the process work. Because once it's built, and then it's all about maintaining. Just like what we kind of talked about with the drivers, the CEO of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, he wears the same shirt every day because he doesn't want to make that, he doesn't want to think about it. He doesn't want to make that decision. Human nature, when you make so many small decisions, as you make more decisions, what happens, future on, you're going to make a mistake. So why not pull all those minute, small decisions of, hey, out of these, 200, 300 invoices, I got to think about these small things. Why not ever have to think about those things? And so again, they can focus on the most important task and most important questions and decisions. So again, it just keeps our mind under pressure because it's just human nature. Once you answer or decide on so many decisions, it just starts trailing down essentially. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I would say, as we bring it around back to this pandemic, you're one of the calmest companies I've seen in your reaction to what's going on with the pandemic. So I'd be intrigued to know why that is. But before you answer, maybe we could throw a poll question to the audience. So we'll just spend about 15, 20 seconds here. Basically asking the audience how heavily has the coronavirus and the pandemic affected your business. So Marianne there in the background, if you can just ask that poll question, and then we can just see what the answers look like there, and then we'll see what our participants think of those answers. So JT, I don't know if you can see the poll question answers at all there, if they're coming in.
They're going to come in a minute.
Okay.
I can see that here. So the poll questions are the following. So how heavily has the coronavirus impacted your business? 21% say heavily, 32% say moderately, 42% say none, and 5% say business is booming.
Are you surprised at all by those statistics, JT?
I'm not surprised. It is unfortunate, especially when the heavily and the moderately categories, which total 50 to 53%, all involve some form of layoffs in the response. So that's unfortunate when you see more than 50% of companies are saying that.
That's interesting. I mean, Tim, back to you. Like, while with those audience responses in mind, you're fairly unfazed. So how are you also prepared? Whereas 50% of the audience participants are considering layoffs at this time, right?
Yeah, I think it's again, it comes back due to technology. I know a lot of logistics and transportation companies, they're still in the decision stage of should we go cloud or should we go say physical on-prem servers. And that's we went to the cloud because we needed that and scalability to be able to integrate with all these different vendors, all these different processes, all these different other servers to gather all of our data. So majority of our workers, they were actually remote, even when they were in the office. So the applications they ran, it was through our servers, through the cloud. So, we kind of lucked out, with that, where the infrastructure of our IT department was. So when this did happen, all they had to do was pick up their laptop or desktop and just go home, and they're all set. Of course, we had to make a couple parameters from the VPN and so forth. But mostly unfazed. I think it was like less than a 1 day turnaround for all of our operations to be remote and get them up to speed. But again, the past few years, logistics, it has been such a hot topic, with more people hearing about it, seeing about it, talking about logistics, that's, a great thanks to FreightWaves. What they do a great job of, putting all that information out there for everybody. But again, with more information, again, more people start to understand the business and how lucrative it is. So again, like hacking, the same thing with TQL, phishing attempts, cyber attacks, because of that tax, we start building on the remote, the VPNs, like we started bringing this all together. So again, off the shelf, we had something ready if we ever needed to then use it. We didn't think it'd be this scale. But again, we were glad that we planned for it with this exercise.
It sounds like you were contingency planning from the start, basically, right? Whether inadvertently or deliberately, right?
Correct. And I think again, all transportation. It's all. Not you have to kind of think of the worst scenarios, because again, that helps us, especially with IT and technology. That's how we think forward. What is the worst thing that can happen right now? If this went down, or DAT or internet trucks up and down, what would they do, or what would this happen? And kind of think about that stuff. That's our mindset and how we get ahead. Because again, maybe like I said, not to this magnitude, but it helped us prepare for the unknown, essentially.
Maybe JT, on your side, obviously, doing strategy consulting and on the investment banking side, have you helped any clients with these type of contingency planning scenarios, or what has been your experience there?
Yeah, back in 2010 and 11, I was heavily involved with a handful of fleets, helping them think through how to deal with that previous trough. There's financial management questions. There's questions around how to leverage the technology currently in the tech stack, which is a little bit different than thinking through an investment decision. And, certainly it seems like the team over at JLE has done a phenomenal job with not just building up a tech stack, but then also leveraging it throughout the cycles, which is being demonstrated by their ability to navigate this market. And then thirdly, stepping back to the sort of customer driver and financial management component of the corporate strategy, one big thing for fleets to be super strategic about is how they manage their long-term customer relationships in a market in markets which may be seeing pressure. And thinking through the longer-term dynamics of contract negotiations is critically important, especially as shippers go to carriers and brokers seeking rate. There's a lot of different ways to navigate those waters, and to make sure that those relationships are managed requires delicate discussions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. The long-term customer relationships are important. Just bring it back to the pandemic. Tim, has now that we're in the thick of quarantine, shelter in place, I'm sure our audience are seeing the palatial confines of all of our home offices. What if anything has changed for JLE at this point?
Really nothing, nothing has changed. Just, staying the course, what we planned out at the beginning of the year, executing what we can control, what the pandemic has shown us with investment in technology and optimization of our process made our employees easier to work remote. The only thing that we really did and, that we leveraged a ton is, our increase in Zoom meetings. It helped us communicate and execute a lot better. But from that standpoint, it's just kind of business as usual, just to stay the course, to make sure we're a strong front, not just for us and, not the back office, but also our drivers, understanding that, since we're not working people are working at remote, we're not slacking off or things like that.
Did you think at all about in addition to the operational risk and streamlined efficiencies, but in terms of the health risks, right? Like for example, for a lot of customers, we're hearing they won't let their drivers go into the shipper to discuss the paper or get the paperwork, right? Did you discuss anything like that in terms around the health risks, or implement stuff around that for your drivers or for your staff?
Yes, our head of HR and our admin, they did a great job, planning this out. One of our VPs, Brandon, we only can control what we can control, right? So we adapted by putting processes for our drivers to make sure they were safe. People in the office, make sure they're safe. remotely.
Mm-hmm.
I think, following the guidelines of the government, PPE, PROS, wash your hands, same thing that everybody's hearing, on a daily basis of what to do. And I'm glad a lot of our shippers that we went to tell you the truth, they were already prepared, already had safeguards in place. Again, major issue, they're not being able to get out their trucks. But, it was good that a lot of the customers were ready for this, which was really, really good and really nice.
Interesting. JT, on your side, what are you seeing across multiple fleets to navigate these sort of health and process challenges?
Yeah, fleets are moving as quickly as possible to be able to ensure that drivers are, one, informed, two, taken care of, and three, have access to the appropriate health services, whether internal or external. And it's really important that, drivers know their resources, and that should an event happen, a health event happen specifically, that they know who to call and what to do. It's also important that they, comply with the appropriate, health recommendations pertaining to gloves and masks and so on and so forth. And then as an industry in total, it's important that we, even something as simplistically as keeping truck stops open. And early on in this crisis, some states shut down truck stops under the thought process that they were protecting consumers from interacting with each other, when in reality they were completely neglecting truck drivers. And luckily those were overturned pretty quickly, but it's thinking like that and understanding that this driver population, they are forced to interact across the entire United States, and we need them to be able to, frankly, and we have to support that in one way or another. Everyone's working as quickly as possible to try to take care of those drivers.
Yeah, I think I'd wholeheartedly agree with that, particularly about the truck stops. And it sounds like informing a driver and taking care of your drivers are paramount. And technology is one way to do this. Let's take a quick poll from our audience on that. The question is how many folks really believe that they have the right technology stack for a crisis, right? Because to take care of your drivers, to inform your drivers, especially if you're at 350 drivers like JLE is, you can't necessarily rely on one-on-one phone calls, and you need tech to support that. So if we could do that poll question, how many folks there in the audience believe that they actually do have the right technology stack? And then JT, I might throw it over to you if you can analyze the results and see what you think about those responses.
Yeah. So the question is, do you believe you have the right technology stack for a crisis? And 14% of respondents said, I'm very concerned about our lack of technology resources. 57% said we're okay, but we're exploring new technologies to deploy. And 21% said we're all set and confident with our tools for drivers in the back office. And 7% said we have no worries. And so, in total, what you're seeing is 71-ish% of respondents are essentially saying that they feel they need to invest in new technologies to better support drivers, which is pretty interesting outcome.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I know, speaking with customers across, JLE and other ones, definitely a lot of people are exploring, but, some people don't know, don't know how, right? And hopefully through this webinar, they can get some insight of the way JLE attacked it, which I think, to some extent they were already thinking about this stuff pre-pandemic. So, maybe we switch tack a little bit and, talk a little bit, on your side, Tim, where has technology, maybe not been as helpful, and have you struggled with anything around that topic?
As of right now, no, but I've seen and talked with a couple other transportation and logistics company. They weren't ready technology wise for the shift and for remote and how to be able to get, hey, they're not sitting across from the billing or the accounting people to do, for example, credit check or this or that. So I see a lot of, transportation companies go out there and try to grab these off the shelf, systems, and not knowing really what the process was or how they did things or even workflow, which caused a lot of confusion, for some of these companies I speak with. Sometimes less is more, focus on what you can do, what you can control, what process do you really understand, and then is there any technology that we can leverage quickly? Nowadays with some of the stuff off the shelf, it's long implementation. I mean, Nathan, understanding how customers work, their workflow. It's just very difficult to just find that one thing off there and, oh yeah, that's what we need. Let's just go grab that and implement that. And, as of right now, my advice is, again, just slow down. Don't get ahead of yourself and get in the wrong technology, because that's when you go down a rabbit hole where did you really need that? Or, you kind of needed it for something. Again, you're not getting your, like we talked about, return on investment. So that's what I've seen.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, that was it.
Yeah, just curious, for our audience members that aren't as prepared, a lot of them felt that they weren't prepared or they were looking at new technology solutions. I mean, you already said some important points about, thinking through it, going slower with the technology adoption and really thinking through the value that technology would provide. But do you have any other advice for our audience, for those that might not be as prepared as yourselves?
Yeah, I mean, just like I said before, control what you can control. We know the environment out there is crazy. Again, try to keep it as business as usual. Our stance is, again, a strong stance. Backing all of our drivers, make sure they're safe, they're taken care of out there. Just like JT said, out on the road and shutting all these stuff down. Again, we need to be there for them, especially, we don't want, they're in the truck by themselves. We don't want any unknown thoughts coming in or uncertainties. So we, again, make sure that they're taken care of and communicated with. The next thing, communication. Again, everybody can be better with communication with all businesses. Zoom, again, get everybody in a meeting group. Whoever your group is or your operations team, have everybody in one room. We've seen better execution and communication just because everybody's hearing small bits and pieces, even though that conversation doesn't really have to deal with them, but they're getting that information, psychologically, as they're listening to it, but they're not thinking, even listening about it. But again, we've caught a lot of errors just because of that, just because they were just sitting in the room and just overheard something. Oh, hey, no, don't do that. You need to be doing this. Okay, thanks. And saved a couple of drivers. And the next important thing, that I'll be looking at, and our team will be working on, is what is the world going to look like after this? What is our new business plan after the pandemic? So getting that together.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, I think you once told me the only two things that matter to you are communication and cash flow when it comes to implementing technology. So I thought that was an interesting statement to share with the audience. JT, is there anything you'd like to add there in terms of, we're heading into the home run of this webinar, but anything you'd like to add there in terms of the advice for our audience in terms of, the ones that aren't as prepared, unlike JLE?
What I would say is, while a rising tide lifts all boats, the opposite can be true during challenging times. Rocks can be exposed in the harbor, and this can be, for any operating company that feels underprepared, they can use this as an opportunity to build a laundry list of strategic initiatives to check off throughout the line and continue to improve the way they perform throughout, the unfortunate future circumstances.
Definitely sounds right. So now as we sort of get to the kind of concluding comments here, this pandemic will end, as much as maybe it seems like it won't, but it does have to end. So Tim, on your side, you alluded to it just now. Like how is this going to change how you manage the business moving forward, or has it just accelerated things that you were already planning on doing? Like what are your thoughts there on moving forward?
Moving forward, again, the important thing is, better procedure just for the safety of our drivers and people at JLE. But again, the whole world is going to be different. We all know that new policies, new requirements, new this, just not even in the transportation industry, just everywhere. For example, a lot of companies are seeing now, like a lot of companies I speak with, they were originally scared of remote users. With this pandemic, it forced their hands to have users remote, when we're seeing better productivity, better execution, better communication for our drivers and for our customers just because of that. And then two, I see this as now, instead of kind of go back to the financial side, do we really need to solve this? Do we really need workers in the office, or can we look, broaden our geographic or location of remote users? So it's a ton of stuff that, that it's going to be different when everybody comes out of this. And, we're excited to begin to adapt to that.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like, challenging, but also exciting. JT, how do you think this is going to change, our industry, the logistics and trucking industry? What are your thoughts on how things are going to change moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think market-moving events, whether black swan or force majeure, are not uncommon in the transportation space. However, a health pandemic is a relatively new style of event for us to be dealing with. And I do think the drivers will and should be the core focus. Some of the biggest lessons learned during this period of time. The other operational performance elements will certainly still hold true in terms of managing either demand side or supply side impacts to operating performance. And then lastly, as Tim alluded to a few times, the ability to have a fully functional remote work environment, which involves more than just making sure everyone has laptops, but also systems, procedures, communication mechanisms is critically important. And, I think a lot of people are learning through trial by fire right now, and hopefully they're making it work. And if not, we'll learn their lessons as quickly as possible.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, no, I think this is accelerating that shift to remote. And I'm reading a lot of articles that are saying, like, well, this really is accelerating things that probably would have happened anyway. It's just happening in the space of a couple months rather than, decades, right? Which is a challenge for everyone. So I think, that pretty much concludes our discussion here. So we're going to open it up to questions now. And I just have a list of them here. We may not be able to get to all of them, but I'll pick the ones that look the most interesting. We'll be submitting a poll here just on feedback on the webinar. So feel free to answer the poll question as we ask these questions. So I will kick off now with the first of the audience questions. Let's see here. So okay, here's a good one. So question from one of our audience: until what point should I invest in technology, given the circumstances of nowadays, without impacting the net income of the companies? So I believe that's a question around investment. And I think, Tim, that's exactly what you were alluding to. What is that point that you're investing in until, you have that kind of negative impact on the income of the company? Is there any kind of detail you can offer there in terms of how you assess that?
Yeah, so it's basically all in the implementation. Again, before even looking at technology, again, make a plan, understand what it's bringing, what is the issue that you're trying to have this technology fix? What do you think the return will be or should be? Okay, then that's your goal. So, can this product be able to do that for you? Yes, maybe it can, maybe it can't. If it does, again, implement it, test it, again, trial it, see it, and again, did we hit our goal or did we not hit our goal, to really determine, if that technology is a fit. And after that, if it doesn't, if you're like, oh man, this was a bad idea, see because I see, a lot of people, they just kind of give up. They're like, oh, okay, this didn't work, or this technology didn't solve the problem. And they kind of leave it in limbo. But again, there's, from what I've seen with a lot of technology and software, they can do a lot of things, maybe use it for something else or a different process, which which again, people don't really think about. They just think of, hey, this is what we purchased this for, but again, it could be used for multitude of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's definitely good. I mean, I think you're expressing there a couple points about trialing it, testing it, seeing if you've reached your goals for that investment, right? And then in addition, seeing other potential uses for that same technology, right? Because one solution can be applied in many areas, particularly in a trucking back office, right? Is what I'm hearing you saying. Here's an interesting question to JT. Is there any consideration to sanitizing the trailing unit? That might be trailer unit. I'm not sure, but is there any consideration to sanitizing the trailing unit, at least partially, to assure shippers and receivers? Do you think it is necessary as a health and customer relations issue?
Yeah, I think increased sanitation can certainly be helpful for the trailing unit. I think also that's also true of the tractor unit as well, although I guess to a lesser extent if the driver is touching the asset. But with multiple hands, figuratively or literally, on the trailing unit, it's important. Now, we could also have the same conversation with the type of freight being loaded, because that also is handled by multiple people. And then following on that, I would just offer one complimentary comment to the previous question pertaining to net income. I would maintain that a good technology investment should actually help increase net income and not compress it. And part of understanding that is developing a good baseline with which you're comparing to.
Yep. I mean, I think, any technology investment has to be either revenue accretive, whether that's through obtaining new revenue or minimizing costs, right, to maximize the revenue that you do have. I think, I definitely echo that. Here's an interesting question, maybe on Tim, your side. About fuel and maintenance. So as fuel and maintenance are usually the highest costs for fleets, do you see a need for technology in the maintenance space? Are you using anything today at JLE for fuel and maintenance?
Yes, we are. It's an internal development that we created to start understanding, because again, what we see, what I saw when I started digging into, our own fleet and maintenance, things weren't get maintained at our standard. Again, we fixed that. But what we were able to do, for example, is understand when on drivers' routes, should they be doing maintenance? Should they be stopping? Is there a good place? So again, we're creating that plan for the driver, so they don't even have to think about it, to understand their maintenance and fuel. Our friends at Pilot, again, all this information that you can gather, from diesel prices, on the driver's routes, all this information, truck parking, with Truck Park, again, to understand, hey, where can these drivers stop? Because again, that's majority of the big issues of maintenance is because it wasn't taken care of. Just same thing, the maintenance of your car. If you don't maintain your car, guess what? It's going to break down the road. But, if the driver knows, like, oh, hey, I have to get an oil change. Hey, there's a, Pilot right here that I can stop at, that I need to reset my hours or whatever. I can take time and still make on-time delivery. Then that's where you leverage technology and maintenance to really understand, to fit maintenance with the driver's timeline, not the other way around, where drivers have to go out of their route to go to the shop to get fixed. So again, it's on their time. And again, it's better for the driver. Because again, he doesn't want to take a day, 2 days driving or sitting because of maintenance or fleet.
Yeah, it's really interesting, that perspective. You've mentioned it a couple times in this webinar of treating the driver almost like a customer, right? And so whereas maybe a lot of things or a lot of solutions out there would just say, well, go here for the cheapest fuel. You're saying, well, sure, go there for the cheapest fuel, but if you are prepared to go or wait an hour, you can do it in line with your ELD hours, and that'd be more efficient, right? And that'll suit you as a driver, right? And so you're bringing up a lot of interesting use cases there and ideas around treating the driver like a customer, right? Yeah, go on.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like the driver, like you just alluded, time is money for them. Hours of service. So how are they going to optimize their time to the best of their ability? And then for what I see with great drivers, they plan out all their routes from, hey, I need to pick up here. I have this many hours to drive. I can take a 30-minute break. I got to check on this. Pre and post trips, things like that. And that's why it's so important. Like you just alluded to that example. Hey, this gas may be cheaper, but me stopping here right now, I lose 30, 45 minutes, which is more important for my on-time delivery for X, Y, and Z. Exactly. If I stop here, I'm not going to make it, essentially. So.
Exactly. Maybe our final question here, and I apologize to our audience members. We got a lot of questions, which is great, but we're probably not going to be able to get to all of them. But this is a good last question to kind of get both perspectives on. Maybe we'll start with you, JT, and then also get Tim your final perspective on this question. The question is you guys talked about communication and cash flow. Do you think businesses will consider solutions that don't require CapEx and quick ROI? Or will the prevailing attitude be that a penny saved is a penny earned, and presumably that, look, any investment is a step in the right direction? Maybe we'll take side of it first, JT, and then we'll get perspective.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say before answering that, if there are follow-on questions that people want to get answered, perhaps we make ourselves available offline, which I personally would be happy to do, and I believe you guys would as well. So I would say that for anyone who's got a good question. We don't want to neglect it. Now, as far as CapEx, technology, operating income, this is a phenomenal question, and this ties to my previous comment associated with developing a baseline with which you can measure the ROI of a given technology, which is critically important. If you can understand the return you're getting from a technological investment, again, it's not a cost item. It can actually be a cash flow item, a net beneficial cash flow item. Furthermore, there are significant tax advantages to CapEx presently under the current tax regime. And so it's important that all fleets understand in conjunction with their accountant tax implications, which may create a tax shield through deploying CapEx, which is not something to forget. That is really important. And to the final question of, is a penny saved a penny earned? It ties back to my first comment, which is simply, if you don't understand your ROI, you might conclude that a penny saved is a penny earned. But the reality is, if it's something like a driver communication technology, and that's critical to retaining your drivers, it's revenue lost if you don't make the investment.
I think that's a super important point, and especially that point about CapEx and the tax shield. I think that's also a good important point to remind our audience. Tim, what about on your side? Maybe as a final comment there. I mean, any thoughts on look, any investment is a good investment as long as it saves money, or is there a bit more thoughtfulness you'd advise there in terms of considering solutions that maybe don't require a CapEx and a quick ROI?
Everything that JT said, I completely agree with it. And a couple of things I would add is, again, before making that investment or understanding your process to make sure. I know I've already said that before, but really understanding your process and understanding that. But with our technology, we kind of think of it more as of, for example, happy employees at a company, guess what? They're going to stay there longer. It goes back to that retention. So we're just trying to make their life easier. Maybe we don't see the return of cost in a money value, but maybe we see it in retention, or again, more of better execution or growth with drivers and people here at JLE. But just a different return, not a really money value, but just a different way to look at it.
Yeah, and I think maybe for some of these things, that's an important point. Maybe it's not that easy to come up with a single metric, right? But as you stated, look, moving to the cloud and moving to remote is the way the world it tends to be going. And, the fact that you guys were doing that already stood you in a great position when this was forced on you and like all of our audience, right? So I think we're at the final kind of end here. I want to thank JT and Tim for your time. I'm not sure if Freightwaves will send out our contact details after this, but
we will.
Feel free. Yep, you will. Yeah, so feel free to get in contact with any of us. Tim, you'll be excited to know there were a lot of questions on JLE and the solution we implemented for you. So how many invoices you process per day, how many billing clerks you have, how you manage to standardize some of these templates. So I'll leave those questions to offline, and hopefully people will reach out. And naturally, Vector is happy to get in touch with anyone interested in our solutions, or certainly I'm sure Tim, you're fine conversing on how you found working with us and and the solutions we provided for you. So I think I'll conclude there. We'll draft up a summary blog post with all the panel answers to anything we were not able to address today. Sorry we couldn't get to your question. Really excited that we had some good attendance here and some great questions. And thank you all for your time, and wishing you all to stay safe and stay healthy in this pandemic. And hopefully we'll see an end and a return to something like normal life pretty soon for everyone. So thank you all, and have a great day.
All right, you should be clear. You guys still there?